All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Daf Lamed Vav. So we left off yesterday a very, very important machlokes regarding chalitza by a mulberis. A woman is pregnant. Normally, right? We say the mitzvah of yibum applies if a man dies and has no children. Okay, but what happens if he leaves a wife who's pregnant and then he dies? So there's machlokes whether the chalitza is done to a woman who was pregnant. Does that work or not? So according to, if I can only find it, right, Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, very good, right?
I don't understand why this is even a question. The whole point is to pass on his.
Okay, but she's pregnant.
So why would there be a question of chalitza?
Let's say she never gave birth. Let's say she had a stillborn.
There's some cases that they don't know that they.
Or she lost her pregnancy. Was the chalitza good or not?
I mean, everything else you understand.
So I'm just going back. Is the Gemara started with this? Rabbi Yochanan says it's good. She does not need another chalitza. It was good. And Reish Lakish Omar, no, it has to go ahead and redo it.
Where are we holding?
So right now we got up to Tanya Kavase the Rava on Lamed Vavam at Aleph, around 7 lines from the top. So Tanya Kavase the Rava. Hakoines Yevimto, one who goes ahead, he jumps the gun, and he marries his Yevam, he does Yibum. The name is Milberes, and it turns out she was pregnant. Now she has a co-wife. Now normally if she has a co-wife and her co-wife does Yibum, so adios, she can go ahead and find a new man and go get remarried and do whatever she wants, right? But over here, then she can't go ahead and marry Sarasa. Why? Because perhaps the woman who's pregnant is going to go ahead and give birth and have a baby. And then what's going to happen? And in that case, right, her having bia or chalitza, right, a month after her husband dies, doesn't do anything, right? Doesn't affect because she was pregnant, is going to have a baby. Ella Vlad Peter, Ella Vlad Peter. Vlad Peter, actually, yes, I love you. And the Vlad only paters when it's born. So you have to wait another 6 months. So therefore, we don't say that Sarah, she can't go ahead and remarry yet, right? Because perhaps then she's pregnant, right? And 7 months later, she's going to go ahead and give birth. And only then, since the previous husband had a baby, therefore she can go ahead and marry Yibum Mechlitza, but she has to wait until then. So she can't go ahead and do anything.
Either, right?
Right. There was nothing was done with her. She can't do nothing. There was no Yibum, no Chalitza. So even though it was done with her co-wife, but that didn't work because she was pregnant, and therefore we don't care about the Yibum Chalitza because it's not going to be Makom Mitzvah because if the Vlad was Kaima.
Not only that, but this guy has to separate for the immediate birth.
But that's what the Mishnah said. The Mishnah says, right? He has to be right. So Talmud is Shema Yev Vlad ben Kaima, and the reason only is because perhaps the baby will be born and the baby will be fine, the baby will be good, and therefore the previous husband, the deceased brother, has a baby, right? Ben Kaim. But if the baby is not born, let's say she miscarries, right? Miftar Tzarasa, right? Then the Sarah sounds like the Sarah be putter. Now, that's why? Because the Yibum or Chalitza that was done while she was pregnant seemed to be effective. So let me do to the Reish Lakish. Let's say it's the Kashin Reish Lakish. I'm going to call Reish Lakish. No, Hakitan is what it means to say. Hakainis Yivim Tavanin says Milberes. One who goes ahead and does Yibum with the Yavam. He jumped the gun too early. He did Yibum after a month. But he says Milberes, and turns out she was pregnant from her deceased husband. So that her Sarah, the co-wife, the other one, can't do anything yet. Why? Shemal Yev Vlad ben Kaima. Perhaps the Vlad she'll miscarry and the baby won't be born. The chalitza is moberes leishmei chalitza, ubias moberes leishmei bia, right? Because the chalitza and the bia was nothing, according to Reish Lakish, because it doesn't work on a pregnant woman. You have to wait till after she miscarries, and only then can you yibum chalitza. V'im taimar halachak Rav Nashin. You're going to say, okay, most women who are pregnant give birth to a viable child. But Rav Nashin, Vlad Yaldan, and most women give birth to children. Yaldan Vlad. The Vlad is not pater until he enters into the air of the world, i.e. until he's born. So therefore, anyways, you have to wait another, 6 months. Fine. Omar Rabbi Elazar, is a passage of this major halacha, right? According to is like Reish Lakish, that says that it's not a good chalitza if it's done to a woman who's pregnant. Like Tanala Masis is not taught anywhere. So Nafak Dav Yashkach, however, he looked into the matter, and it appears perhaps we could learn this from a Mishnah. That's now we learn in the Mishnah. You have a woman who her husband went and her co-wife, right? So the man was married to two women, and the guy he won 2 tickets on a cruise, right? And he only took one of his wives. So and they told her your husband died on the cruise, right, in the Caribbean. So now the co-wife is still alive, right? She's somewhere in the Caribbean, but this co-wife cannot go ahead and marry, right? Because if we know that he had a baby with her, then she doesn't need Yibum Chalitza, right? If she wasn't pregnant or she didn't have a baby, then obviously she can't go ahead and marry whoever she wants because she has to do either Yibum or Chalitza with one of the brothers. So basically, so until we know in this case that perhaps she's pregnant in this case, or her co-wife is pregnant, right? Her co-wife is pregnant, and therefore, so maybe now in this case, since your co-wife is pregnant in the Caribbean, maybe you're okay. You don't need Bibu Chalitza. So I understand why we tell this woman, right? Her co-wife who was stuck in Chicago. I understand why we tell her, hey, you can't go ahead and do Yibum with the brother over here because your co-wife, right, might give birth in the Caribbean, and therefore you'd be violating an Isra of Eshesach, which is a Deraisa. Ella, right? Why can't you do just Chalitza with the brothers now? So tests within 9 months. The tests. So I understand that, in other words, let's say she does Chalitza now, or she goes ahead and gets married now. Lo, Hainu Safek, that's the Safek, because maybe she's pregnant, maybe she's not. So, right, obviously she can't go ahead and remarry, do Chalitza now, because you have to wait till the 9 months is up for your co-wife. Ella Tichlas Tisha. Why don't we go ahead and tell her, do Chalitza now? But Tina saying, if you want to go ahead and marry Liachar Tisha, right, and go ahead and marry afterwards. So it doesn't tell you to do that. It must be because Chalitza doesn't work now. Chalitza doesn't work immediately because her co-wife, it's muberes, it's in wait. Even according to you, right, they should say that she go ahead and do Chalitza and go ahead and marry after. Now, it doesn't say that. It says she can't do either. So Ella bar minami, he actually don't learn from there. Dabai bar Abba Rav Chidina bar Abai Demar Tavayu Shema Vlad ben Kaima. No, the reason why we tell her don't do Chalitza, don't do even before, is Venim Tata Amatzricha Cruz the Kuna. Because let's say like this. Let's say we tell her to go ahead and do Chalitza now. Okay, so and even if it turns out that the woman gave birth and the Chalitza was nothing, right, and she didn't need Chalitza, so because she wasn't pregnant, it's their co-wife. Right? So if you do Chalitza with her, right? So do Chalitza just in case and go ahead and marry somebody else. What's going to problem? Let's say the woman gave birth, her co-wife in the Caribbean. So now this one, her Chalitza was nothing because the deceased husband left over a child. Right. So people are going to think she's a Chalutza. And she goes ahead and marries a Kohen. People say, oh, the halacha is a woman had Chalitza can marry a Kohen. So therefore, we don't want her to go ahead and do Chalitza at this point because you have to go ahead and announce afterwards. Okay, so we'll announce it. Big deal. Let her do Chalitza. Let her go ahead and marry somebody else after 9 months. And if it turns out that her co-wife had a baby, we'll just say that the Chalitza was nothing. That there was, it was a non-factor. So Dilma Ika Inish Dahav Bechalitza Vlad Bekuna Bachraza V'Asin Lememar Kashari Chalutza Lakoy. Now perhaps there'll be people who are by the Chalitza. What?
Can you reverse Chalitza?
Well, it's just you remove the shoe and you spit and you whatever and you say this.
You marry Kohen after you do the Chalitza.
No.
In that condition, no.
No. In that condition, we'll say the Chalitza was nothing because her co-wife gave birth.
Right.
So people aren't going to know. People are going to think, oh, I was at the Chalitza, right? It was a Chalitza party 3 months ago. And all of a sudden she marries Rav Cohn, right? She marries, Asher Katz, right? She marries a Cohen, right? So, and people are going to think, oh, Chalutza is mutter. They're not going to know. They didn't hear them announce that, hey, by the way, that Chalitza was nothing because it turns out that her co-wife had a baby in the Caribbean and therefore she never needed Chalitza or Yibum from any of the brothers.
It was a puzzle chalitza.
Right. Well, it wasn't possible. It wasn't possible. Right. It was meaningless. It wasn't. It was unnecessary. Right. She was out. So Amarle Abaye. So it says Abaye immediately Ktani. Does it say don't do chalitza, don't do yibum? Ktani. It says lo tinase lo tisyabim Ktani. It doesn't say that. It says don't marry and don't do yibum Ktani. Lo chalitza. About I chalitz la hachinami the sharia. But if you would have done chalitza, it would have been okay. So in other words, according to this, it deflects and says no. Perhaps that even chalitza during this time would have been mutter. So Tanya Kabasi the Reish Lakish, you have a price in support of Reish Lakish. Hachalitz l'mberes, one does chalitza to the actual woman who is pregnant, the pila, and then she miscarries. Sricha chalitza mina achin. She needs chalitza from the brothers. In other words, that the chalitza of muberes is nothing. All right, this is the halacha according to Reish Lakish, and therefore chalitza to a woman who's pregnant, you got to go ahead and redo the chalitza. Amar Rav, Hilchasa Kavase the Reish Lakish Bahani class. Normally halacha machlokes the Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yechon is like Rabbi Yechon, except halacha is like Reish Lakish in these three cases. Chad Ahad Amran. First is the one in the case in which we just said that one who does chalitza to a woman who's pregnant has to go back and redo the chalitza because the licha was invalid. And Ida, what is the next case? The Tanah we learned in the Mishnah, nothing to do with Yibum or chalitza. The Tanah Namachal Chasav. One is going ahead and he's a shchimera, he's on his deathbed, he's very ill, he's going to die. So we allow him to go ahead and sort of distribute some of his assets without sort of not in a star, al piv. But this is only, but he is allowed, when one is alive, he's allowed to go ahead and give away gifts, right? He can't give away Yerusha, okay? So now, al piv. On his mouth, he gives one, 80%, one 20%, or he shalem as a bechor, or he says, the bechor doesn't get pishnaim, everyone gets equal amount, and he says in his words, devarav kayam, his words are valid. However, if he says only Yerusha, you're going to inherit this, you're going to inherit this, you're going to inherit that, that doesn't work, okay? Because only because Yerusha. However, if it's but if it's written anywhere that he's giving it to them with the matana, devarav kayam, right? His words are held up, right? It's valid, right? And what does it mean that betchila? For instance, he says tinasen. Rashi says the three cases tinasen, right? Give, which is a lashon of present. Tinasen plonis ploni yershana. Right? So give it the Yershana, or he says in the middle of the statement, Yarsha Tinasein lo, right? The Yarsha, or he says the word Tinasein, the gifting is in the middle part of the statement, or Basov in the end, Yarsha Tinasein lo, right? Inherit and take this, right? So all these cases, he's including the word of take or give, right? Which is a lashon of matana and not a lashon of Yerusha. So even though it has Yerusha in it, so therefore it doesn't matter as long as matana is in it, that works. And to the page number on this page, like it says, explaining, right? So Machlokes Amoraim over there. Where does it appear? In Rashi, I saw Rashi brought down where it was. Right, so it was a polygal hasab, right? Yesh Neichlin, right? The parak Yesh Neichlin over there is Machlokes Amoraim, and on there, like it says, Li'em Lo'ikana Ad Shiomar Ploni Uploni Yarshu Sadeh Plonis Uplonis Shetizem Lahem Matana v'Yarsha. Says no, the lashon has to be give so and so, that each and every one of them he has to say you're given, right? The lashon matana and Yerusha, right? So he has to say both in order to be valid. So in other words, if he doesn't say matana included by every single recipient, then that does not work. So that was halachas like Reish Lakish in that case. And what is the third case? V'idach, the Tanai we're doing in the Mishnah. Now, one who says to his son, okay, I'm going to give you all my assets, my orchard, liachar ma'isa. I'm going to give you all my stuff after I die, right? Liachar ma'isa, ha'av. Excuse me, ha'av ein yachol limkar,
after you the will, that's it. They can't sell anything.
So new case, really right? So therefore, right? So the father, right? So the father can't go ahead and sell it during his lifetime. He can't go ahead and sell it now because he says, after I die, I'm giving it to my son. So therefore, the son sort of owns, Shtickle owns the orchard. Also, and the son also can't go ahead and say, great, my dad gave it to me after he dies. I can go ahead and sell it now. He can't do it, right? Because the peros are in the shoes of the father. So each one like half owns it. right? The child really owns the orchard itself, and the father owns the peiros, but therefore neither one can sell it. However, machar av mechurin, achimos who, right? The father can go ahead and sell it until he dies. So basically, he can sell if he wants, but he only sells the rights until he dies. Once he dies, it goes back to the son. And machar ben in the sense sells it, and lokech klum achimos av, and the son can go ahead and sell it. But however, the buyer doesn't take possession of it until after the father dies. Now, what about Vitamar? Machar ben b'chayav. So let's say the son sells it while the father is alive. Umeis haben, and then the son dies. So normally it was after the father dies, it triggers to the son. But now over here, the son died before the father. So what happens in this case? Vitamar machar ben b'chayav. Umeis ben b'chayav. And then the son died while the father was alive. Rabbi Yochanan or like kana like chaos. Rabbi Yochanan says the buyer got nothing. Reish Lakish Amar, it's even after the father dies. Reish Lakish Amar kana lokech. The purchaser did get something. He has just wait till the father dies. Rabbi Yochanan Amar like kana lokech. Rabbi Yochanan says it doesn't work. Why? Because kinyan peiros kinyan guvdami. Because whoever owns the fruits, right? He owns the rights to the land, and therefore, since the father owned the rights to the fruits, so therefore the son's sale of the property was invalid because it never became his fully because he died before the father. Right? He says, no, the buyer does buy because kinyan peiros laki kinyan guvdami. Even though the child does not have the peiros in his rights, right? Nevertheless, even if he sells it, once the father does die, because owning the rights of the fruits does not own the property itself. And therefore, once the father dies, then it would trigger the sale to the buyer, and the buyer would get it after the father dies. Fine. Two dots. Going back to what we discussed yesterday in the Mishnah. So yesterday in the Mishnah, we says one does chalitza, turns out she's pregnant. All right, and if bezancha zalashal kaima, who mutrakosevi was regav lay pasman kuna, ain't zalashal kaima, who was mutrakosevi yes regav pasman kuna. Hakani see vinta vinces no bears. The next case was one who goes ahead and marries his yavama, and turns out she's pregnant. He jumped the gun. He only waited a month, and then all of a sudden he marries her, and all of a sudden 2 weeks later, she appears she's already 3 months pregnant. The yelda, all right, and then she gives birth. Bezancha zalashal kaima yaitzi. Right, so if she gives birth and then the child is, I'm just reading from the Mishnah. Sorry about that. Right, so then the case is good. But it says if the vlad, right, does not survive, then kaima, right? Then he can go ahead and then yikayim. Then he can go ahead. He can stay with her because she miscarried and his brother never had children. It was like he just did it a little too early. So Tana Mishum Rabbi Eliezer Amru Yaitzi the get. Nope. You did wrong. You jumped the gun. You didn't listen to Chazal. Wait 3 months. Therefore, yeah, you are. But you have to divorce her.
Right.
The Ibn worked. The Yaitz beget. Divorce her. Huh?
I like that.
What was that? So let's see. So Amar Rava, Rabbi Eliezer, Amar Davar Echad. Rabbi Eliezer says Davar Echad. Rabbi Eliezer Had Amran. So Rabbi Eliezer has just said, in other words, if one goes ahead and marries when he shouldn't have, so the penalty is you have to go ahead and divorce her. And where do we see Rabbi Meir? The Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer said in the case of Yibuf, he says, right, he jumped the gun too early, he has to divorce her. Rabbi Meir, the Tanya, Lo yisad muberes chavera menigas chavera. A person should not go ahead and marry a woman who is pregnant. We know she's pregnant, right? We don't, the issue is that perhaps she'll become pregnant again, right? And then therefore it'll sort of destroy the first fetus, or menigas chavera, or she's nursing. If she's nursing, perhaps she'll no longer be able to nurse, and therefore that will perhaps kill the baby. So one should not go ahead and marry a woman who's pregnant or nursing who's still nursing. V'imnasa, and if he goes ahead and marries her, and he shouldn't have, yaitzi. Says Rameir, divorce her, and he can never go ahead and marry her again. All right, so we're touching on what Meir just asked. Yaitzi. No, divorce her, right? Then once, let's say she's done nursing, or once she gives birth to her previous husband's child, then he can go ahead and marry her. He's allowed to go ahead and remarry the lady. Rameir says you can't, and over here, and Chachamim say you can't.
Are we talking about a yavam?
There's no yavam. No, this is not a case of yavam. It's a regular case of a woman who is nursing or pregnant. Don't marry her because it could cause danger to the baby. So I'm really Abaye. So no, two of them are the same. So I'm really Abaye. Mimai. Who says these two cases are similar? Dilma, perhaps Lohi. It's not the same. Ad kan loy kamar Rabbi Eliezer hacha el mishum de kapaga beiser eishes ach deraisa. Over here, maybe the reason why we penalize him is why, because she's pregnant. The she's pregnant, then her deceased brother had a baby, and therefore there's an iser deraisa of the wife of your brother, which is deraisa, the karis, right? So therefore, that's the reason why we make divorce. Well, Hassan, but over there, in the case of don't marry a pregnant woman or don't marry a nursing woman, the rabbanan, and in other words, maybe it's their own karbanas for the maybe holy karbanan that you can go ahead and stay with her. It does not need to divorce her. Inami, or you can say, over there, we don't make a penalty. It says if you go ahead and marry it too early and do even too early, mishum mishum only over there, yes, in other words, only over there in the case where it's a derabanan, don't marry a nursing woman, don't marry a pregnant woman. Some will say, oh, it's only derabanan, it's such a big deal, there's the baby, don't worry, right? The baby will be fine, right? So therefore, in that case, we make a severe penalty. You marry her too early, you got to divorce her. But in the case of a yavam, perhaps doing yibum with the pregnant woman, people are going to be extra careful. No one's going to go ahead and do yibum too early because it could be that she's pregnant already from the deceased husband. And Amar Rava, so now he said the cases are different. And Amar Rava, yaitzi the get says Rabbanim, and that which we say. Right, and over there, the one that says that he has to go ahead and he says he has to leave her. Right, the Chachamim who argues are a mayor. Right, let me just find the Bryce. Right, the Chachamim Yaitzi. Actually, now the Chazal say safe travels. Where's he off to Israel? All right, so he say Yaitzi. So that which he said he marries a pregnant woman. So the Chachamim said Yotzi. Right. Go out, Yotzi, and when the time comes, you can go ahead and remarry her, or you can be with her. So it says that what you say Yotzi means Yotzia beget. Divorce her, wait till she's give birth, then remarry her again. So Marzutra Diganami, right? We can do it for the Tani. It says over there, Yotzi Loktani Yafrish. It says Yotzi, which is a lotion of Yotzi beget. Loktani Yafrish doesn't just say separate, right? Separate from her, and not to have Bia in order to that would put her the baby at risk. So Shmamina, indeed, learn from there Yotzi beget. Now, Amalei, by the way, anyone who has to leave early, I'm just going to get to the two dots towards the top of tomorrow's daf. It goes quick. Amalei Ravashi Rav Hoshia. So it says Ravashi Rav Hoshia Berei Ravidi Hasam Tanam. We learn over there. Rav Shimon Gamliel Aimer Kol Shishal Adam Shleishim Yom Eino Nefel. So it says anything that's 30 days when it comes to humans, right? Later on, we'll talk about animals, but any human that is a baby, right? There's 30 days. Eino Nefel is not considered to be a Nefel. And therefore, it's considered to be a child that's considered to be, if someone has a baby, it's considered like they had a baby. And even if the baby died in the hospital, if it was 30 days, it's considered to be that person had a child. So ain't a nefel. Ha losha. But if it's less than 30 days, according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, sveika. It's a suffix, right? We always, the halacha l'maisa where we hold 30 days, but over there, right, if it's less between 0 and 30, it's a suffix whether nafil or not. So if a deceased brother had a baby that survived for 2 weeks, right, it's a sveika according to Rosh Gamliel. So a nafil hashala shas sveika havi the itamar, and the Rabbanan actually hold, right, and this is all going, and this is only going with if she wasn't full term. But if we know she was full term, then even less than 30 days is good. The itamar meis b'sach shloshim yayim. If the child has been 30 days, and then she went ahead and she got married, right? Then she received kedushin. Ravina mishmei Rav Amar im eishes Yisrael he. If she's an eishes Yisrael he chaletzas. If she is if the guy marrying her is a Yisrael, so chaletzas. Go ahead, do chalitza. In other words, we'll pretend we're going to say that the baby does not count, right? And therefore required chalitza. Go ahead and do chalitza, and then remarry her. The Eishes Kohen, however, if she's an Eishes Kohen, then eina chaletzas. All right. So in other words, however, if the guy she got kedushin from was from somebody else, and all of a sudden she says, "Well, I want to be with him, but if I do chalitza, it turns out I have to do chalitza, then I can't go back to him." The Eishes Kohen, eina chaletzas. So we differentiate between Eishes Yisrael and Eishes Cohen. We're being nice in this case. He says no. Says Masharshia, too bad. You got to do chalitza, right? Perhaps the child is not considered to have been born, and therefore you got to do chalitza. And if you try to go ahead and get kedushin or kohen, tough cookies. And Amar Le Ravina, Masharshia says Ravina to Masharshia. Now Masharshia was on says yes, do chalitza. So he says Barsa Amar Rava Hachi with Safra Hadarbe, right? In the morning. Right, he says he has to do chalitza, and then actually at night, right? He said he did chalitza, and in the morning he woke up. He was chayzer. He says doesn't have to do it, right? And all of a sudden, right, he's gonna matter. Summer lay, right? So he says, "What sharisu? What you're gonna go ahead and permit it, right? Yeah, Rava, there's off the darba. You should go ahead and permit forbidden fasts, right? You're gonna matter this lady, right? To her coin, right? Why don't you go ahead and while you're at it, might as well be matter chalif,
Right.
So Gabi Muberes. So what about this case? By Gabi Muberes Chavero, Menigas Chavero, in the case of now the woman is pregnant and she's nursing. And she goes ahead and she marries a Kohen. She wasn't supposed to, right? You got to wait till after she's pregnant or after she finishes nursing, but the Kohen married her too soon. So what is the halacha there? Remember, we said according to Chachamim it was Yotzi, and we said Yotzi beget. So me avid rabban takanasa lekohen. Hello, do we say in that case also tough cookies? You got to go ahead and divorce, right? And therefore she can't go ahead and remarry this guy because she's now a right. She's a grusha because he was divorcing her, right? They're about to kasa lekohen. Hello, so relay haki ashta. So according to over there's a reason to be made. Because even though we had Rosh Hashanah who says 30 days, according to the Rabbanan, even if a baby was less than 30 days, it's considered to be a baby. It's considered to be born. And therefore, in that case, if the baby is born, there's no chalitza required. Right. So therefore, we'll say chalitza is required when it's Yisrael. But if it's a Kohen, then we don't have to be so machmer because there's reason what to be so machmer, right? So Hasim came to the Rabban to play the Rosh Hashanah, even though it didn't last 30 days, that was because of the Vlad Balia. So therefore, Gab Eish Kohen, by Eish Kohen came to Leavshar of Dina Karaban, and since over there by Eish Kohen, if she goes ahead and does chalitza, she can't go ahead and be with the Kohen. So therefore, we'll hold the Rabbanan that hold that it was considered to be the deceased brother had a baby. But in this case, Kaman Navid over here, right? We're not being saimech on a shita of the Rabbanan to say that it's considered to be a child, right? That there's a gzeira that a woman who's nursing or pregnant should not marry at that time. So Ikra Meir, and if you're there, Meir Halmar Yaitzi lo Yachzi Alamis. Rameir says you have to divorce her and can't remarry her at all. Right? He Rabbanan Hamri beget, and the Rabbanan say you got to leave her with the get. So both shitas, everybody holds, right? That you have to divorce her, right? So what do you say in that case? So Itamar, fine. So in that case, literally, there's no room to be samech on a kula there, and she has to go ahead and divorce because both she's remain on their bottom, hold the divorce. Now Itamar, real quick, Kichav is a shleisha, a guy who goes ahead and he marries her within shleisha, within the first 3 months. We don't know, right? She's pregnant or not from her first husband. Ubarach, and he runs away. So the plig of Ravacha v'Rafram. So the machlokes in Ravacha v'Rafram. One says we put him in chayr. Right? Put him in chayr. Even though the guy ran off, he's not going to go ahead and have bia with her. Right? He's not going to go ahead. There's not going to be suffix of who's the child is, but we put him in chayr because he married. He did kedushin. He wasn't supposed to. The other says no. He says a ruke misatia. Right, his running away basically shows that he's not going to have an abiyah. So have you Rafram Iruka Mistaya. Right, his running away basically sort of separated him from her, and therefore avoided the situation of a suffix a suffix of Ben Rishon or Sheni, and therefore in that case we don't necessarily put him in here. All right, we'll stop here. Have a wonderful day.
Well, we'll see you after Pesach.